November 2022, Orchard Park, New York, 66 inches of snow in a single day. Roofs collapsed. A bowling alley caved in. The NFL had to move a Bills game out of the city. This wasn't just a storm. It erased the entire area, and it hit the exact land, where they are now building a $2.2 billion open-air stadium. They knew exactly what this place could do, and they built it anyway. And how this stadium is supposed to survive a storm like that, we'll get there, because what they built here is unlike anything in NFL history. June 5th, 2023, the shovels go into the ground. This is the beginning of the largest construction project in the entire history of Western New York. The investment pushes past $2 billion when you include infrastructure, demolition, and surrounding development. And this is where the project quietly starts falling apart. For a region built on industrial grit and blue-collar resilience, this stadium is more than a sports venue, it's a statement. The Bills are staying in Orchard Park. A 30-year lease locks them in until 2056. At the April 2025 topping out ceremony, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said it would secure the franchise for decades, while Governor Hochul called it a world-class stadium. And the ambition behind it is real. The architect is Populous, the firm that has built more NFL stadiums than any other practice on the planet. SoFi Stadium, Allegiant Stadium, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. These are not people who make beginner mistakes. The construction joint venture is Gilbane and Turner, two of the most experienced names in sports infrastructure in North America. The design itself is striking. 62,000 seats, deliberately capped below 65,000. The seating bowl drops 35 feet into the ground, cutting wind and pulling fans closer to the action. Upper rows sit 54 feet nearer than the old stadium. Tighter, louder, more intense. Exactly what Bills Mafia wanted. Personal seat licenses went on sale in 2024, and by late 2025, 90% were already gone, bringing in $245 million for the Pegula family, far beyond projections. On paper, it looks like a perfect success story. A modern stadium built for a city that has waited decades for it. Quick one, subscribe. You're officially in the draw for the next crazy story. So why does the story keep getting harder to tell with a straight face? Let's start with the engineering, because it is genuinely impressive and because understanding it is what makes the cracks in it so unsettling. Populous did not design a dome. They designed something more architecturally daring and more exposed. A 360-degree canopy wraps the entire seating bowl. It covers approximately 64% of all seats. The canopy is not just large, it is shaped with precision. Concave, angled inward toward the field. That angle is not aesthetic, it is structural physics. Snow that lands on the canopy surface flows naturally toward collection points rather than piling up in heavy drifts at the outer edges. It is elegant, it is deliberate, and it took years of modeling to get right. But the canopy's real weapon is not its shape, it is what runs inside it. Threaded throughout the steel decking is a network of hydronic pipes, tubes filled with heated fluid that circulate continuously when the system is active. Sensors embedded throughout the structure monitor temperature and precipitation in real time. The moment those sensors detect snow or ice accumulating, the system activates automatically. Snow that lands on the canopy does not pile up, it melts on contact. Construction officials called it what it is, the world's largest snowmelt system. By coverage area, that claim is accurate. There is nothing else like it on a stadium structure anywhere on Earth. The system runs across more than 4 acres of canopy surface. It consumes enough energy when fully active to power hundreds of average American homes simultaneously. And it has to perform instantly, because in a lake effect event, you do not get a warning window. The snow arrives and it arrives fast. The field has a similar system embedded beneath the natural grass. Seating areas and key sections have radiant heating built directly into the precast concrete. There are warming zones throughout the concourses, sheltered spaces where fans can escape the worst of it without giving up their game day experience. Then there are the 4,400 perforated steel panels wrapping the exterior facade. As wind hits those panels, it gets diffused and slowed before it ever reaches the seating bowl. The crosswind that has made late-season Bills games feel like standing in a wind tunnel for 5 decades? Significantly reduced, controlled, redirected. Wind tunnel testing during the design phase recorded gusts inside the old stadium regularly exceeding 40 miles per hour at field level. The new design targets a reduction that makes that number feel like a different climate entirely. And here is the detail that Populous got exactly right, the one that makes this design genuinely poetic. That same canopy built to protect fans from snow is angled inward specifically to trap and amplify crowd noise. It bounces sound back down into the bowl. The engineers who designed a system to fight Buffalo's climate also weaponized it. Cold, dense air carries sound differently. The Bills Mafia, already one of the loudest fan bases in the NFL, is about to get an acoustical amplifier built around them. Noise tests conducted during late construction phases suggested decibel levels that would rank among the highest ever recorded in an NFL venue. This is the system that is supposed to make the difference when a storm like 2022 hits again. On paper, this is a masterpiece, which makes what happened during construction so much more important to understand. Now, let's talk about what actually happens when you try to build the world's largest snowmelt system in Buffalo during Buffalo winters. Start with the number nobody leads with. This is the moment the plan starts slipping. The project launched with an original estimate of $1.4 billion. That was the number in the contracts, the number in the approvals, the number that got signed. By the time construction moves through 2024 and into 2025, the total cost has crossed $2.1 billion. Factor in the full scope, infrastructure, demolition, surrounding development, and the complete investment crosses $2.2 billion. That is an $800 million gap between the plan and the reality. Rising labor costs, material inflation, post-COVID supply chain disruption. These are real factors, and they have hit every major construction project in America. But there is one factor here that is specifically, brutally Buffalo's problem: wind. Every crane on this site has a hard operational shutdown threshold of 29.8 miles per hour. When gusts off Lake Erie exceed that number, the cranes get boomed down, locked out, offline. Because at 300 plus feet of elevation, with 25,000 tons of steel being positioned in precise angles, wind is not a nuisance. It is a structural emergency waiting to happen. And in Orchard Park, in January, coming off Lake Erie, 29.8 miles per hour is not the exception. In January 2025, the construction team logged just 4 usable crane days for the entire month. Entire days where nothing moved, but the deadline never did. 4 days, across 31 calendar days. February gave them 6. That is 10 usable crane days across 2 full months. Months that were supposed to represent significant structural progress on the project's timeline. The response was immediate and aggressive. 7-day work weeks, double shifts wherever conditions allowed. On every day, the wind cooperated. Crews pushed as hard as the site could physically sustain. And it worked. Mostly. The structural milestones kept arriving. The exterior facade closed. In November 2025, the natural grass field went in, a calculated risk driven purely by timeline pressure. Grass laid in late autumn in western New York needs months to root and establish before it can absorb the punishment of an NFL game. They could not afford to wait for spring. But the cost of recovery does not disappear just because the milestones get hit. Every lost crane day creates knock-on pressure. Sequencing gets compressed. Subcontractors collide with each other's schedules. Mechanical systems, electrical infrastructure, and technology platforms that were designed to be installed in a specific order get forced into parallel tracks. The margin for error shrinks every time a weather event pushes the schedule. The forensic schedule documents filed with New York State tell the story the press releases skip over. December 2024. The project is 44.5% complete with 19 days of negative schedule float. They are behind, and there is no cushion. January 2025. A crane incident damages underground systems. February 2025. Severe weather adds more slippage. The substantial completion target gets formally reset to June 2026. 0 days of float remaining. Zero float means exactly what it sounds like. Any single disruption, one more weather event, one equipment failure, one supply chain delay, lands directly on the move-in date with nothing to absorb it. By August 2025, with the project officially 64% complete, internal documents show it running 12% behind its baseline schedule. Industry analysts flag that finishing on time could require late-phase acceleration at a cost that further widens the gap between original budget and final number. And then, right in the middle of all this compressed, pressurized construction activity, A fire breaks out. December 2025. Welding sparks ignite inside the unfinished building. No injuries, no structural damage, controlled quickly. But it creates another work stoppage on a schedule where there is no such thing as a free pause. Then February 2026. Graffiti appears inside secured interior areas of the stadium. Construction workers are identified as suspects. A security overhaul follows. Another stoppage. Another disruption absorbed by a team that has spent 2 full years converting Buffalo's winters into an obstacle course and somehow staying on the path. As of March 2026, the project is more than 90% complete. Officials confirm it is on track for a late July 2026 handover. The schedule held, the engineering held, the people held. But here is the part of the story that does not resolve in July 2026. Here is the part that actually matters. The stadium is going to open. That much is settled. The Bills will play there in the fall of 2026. The Bills Mafia will show up exactly the way they always do. Loud, painted, furious, and completely indifferent to temperature. And for most games, most Sundays, the engineering will do exactly what the engineers promised it would do. But there is a question at the center of this entire story that $2.2 billion has not answered. That it cannot answer. That no amount of money or modeling or hydronic piping can answer in advance. What happens when the 2022 storm comes back? The snowmelt system is sophisticated, genuinely impressively sophisticated. Real-time monitoring, automated activation, a drainage design validated through exhaustive 3-dimensional structural modeling. The engineers studied every documented weather event in Buffalo's recorded history. But the 2022 storm was not a data point in a historical record. It was 66 inches in a single day, snow falling at 2 to 3 inches per hour, sustained, not for an afternoon, for an entire event cycle. The kind of snowfall rate where the question stops being whether your system can handle snow and starts being whether your system can handle snow falling faster than physics allows it to melt. Nobody has tested this system in those conditions. Nobody can test it until Buffalo decides, on its own schedule with no advance notice, to send another storm like that directly into Orchard Park. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. Stadium engineers design for what they call the design storm, a calculated threshold, the worst realistic scenario the system needs to survive. But design storms are built from historical averages and probability models, educated guesses. And the 2022 event did not behave like a probability model. It behaved like something that was not supposed to happen, and then happened anyway. Structural engineers call these tail events, outcomes so far outside the normal distribution that most models treat them as theoretical. Buffalo has now produced one within living memory, on the exact site where this stadium stands, which means the next one is not theoretical at all. The canopy covers 64% of seats, which means 36% of fans, around 22,000 people on a sold-out day, are sitting in completely open air. The field itself is entirely uncovered, intentionally, because the Bills chose identity over a dome roof that would have added hundreds of millions more to a project already $800 million beyond its original number. That choice is right for what Bills football is supposed to be. The 2017 Snow Bowl, 16.7 inches falling during the game, players invisible through the whiteout, fans screaming anyway, is not a cautionary tale in Buffalo. It is mythology. A dome would have taken something irreplaceable from this franchise. But identity does not resolve what happens when a historic storm arrives on a Sunday afternoon with 62,000 people already inside. The snowmelt handles the canopy. It does not handle the open sections. It does not handle the field. And it does not handle 22,000 fans sitting under open sky at 3 inches per hour. The NFL has protocols. Games get postponed, relocated. But postponements cost money. Relocations cost more. And for a franchise that committed 30 years and $2.2 billion to one specific place, repeatedly moving games out of that place sends a message no press release can undo. This stadium is not only hosting Bills games, it is hosting NHL Winter Classics, potential NFL draft events, concerts, programming that draws crowds who never learned that attending a Bills game requires dressing like a survival exercise. One catastrophic weather event during a high-profile occasion does not just create a bad night. It creates a permanent narrative. The clip that plays every time someone questions whether open-air stadiums belong in northern climates. There is a version where the system works, where every storm becomes legendary, where Buffalo turns its greatest liability into its greatest advantage. And there is a version where November 2027 arrives, and this becomes the most watched stress test in the history of sports infrastructure. Nobody knows which version is coming. There is a bowling alley in Hamburg, New York that used to have a roof. Here is what is actually sitting on the outcome of this. New York State has committed $600 million in public funding. Erie County has committed $250 million. Together, taxpayers carry $850 million of this project on their backs. The Pegula family covers every dollar above $1.54 billion, which at current totals means the family has absorbed something approaching $700 million beyond the original shared framework. This is public money. This is generational investment. This is not a private luxury project tucked away somewhere nobody can see it. This is the most expensive open-air stadium ever built, and it is in the snowiest major city in America. For Buffalo, this goes beyond any financial argument. This city has watched businesses leave, watched population shrink, watched larger markets absorb opportunity and investment that never quite traveled far enough west. The Bills are not a sports team to Buffalo in the way that a sports team is to most cities. They are the most visible proof that Western New York is still here, still serious, still refusing to disappear quietly. The 30-year lease is not a business arrangement, it is a commitment. When Terry Pegula stood at the topping out ceremony and reminded the crowd that the old stadium cost $22 million to build in 1973, and that this one is 100 times that, he was not talking about inflation. He was talking about what this city is willing to bet on itself. The financing debate is real and it is fair. Critics point out that the NFL generates over $18 billion in annual league revenue. That franchise ownership operates at a scale of wealth that makes public subsidy arguments genuinely uncomfortable. Those arguments deserve to be heard. But the counter-argument is also real. Without a stadium deal, this franchise had documented paths to relocation. Toronto, San Antonio, Austin. The $850 million in public investment is, depending on how you measure it, insurance against a loss that would cost Western New York far more than the premium. The community benefits agreement built into the deal mandates local hiring, living wage standards, support for minority and female-owned businesses, and a new transit hub at Abbott Road and Southwestern Boulevard. Real provisions designed to push the investment's impact beyond the stadium footprint and into the community that is paying for it. And when the new building opens, the current Highmark Stadium, the one that has hosted the Bills since 1973, gets demolished. Seats pulled out, signage taken down, pieces of the structure sold to the fans who stood in it through 5 decades of frozen Sundays. One last moment of nostalgia converted into revenue before the old building disappears and the new chapter officially begins. So here is where everything lands. A city that has absorbed more than most cities are ever asked to absorb. A franchise that came within a political negotiation of leaving. A $2.2 billion structure rising from the same frozen ground where, 3 years ago, a storm dropped 66 inches of snow in a single day and reminded everyone that no amount of planning fully accounts for what Lake Erie is capable of. A 64% canopy, the world's largest snowmelt system, 4,400 perforated wind panels, radiant heating embedded in concrete, grass planted in late autumn because the deadline does not move and the stakes are too high to slow down. And somewhere to the west, Lake Erie is doing exactly what it has always done, getting cold, pulling moisture, loading up, waiting. Buffalo built a stadium designed to survive its winters. Now it just has to survive one. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and comment what you think happens when the next Buffalo storm hits this stadium. Because sooner or later, we're going to find out.